Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippine. Welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. And the Vikings are playing an away game at the Cincinnati Bengals for Week 15 of the NFL season on a Saturday at noon, which is just kind of weird and jarring, but exciting that we get some NFL football on a different day of the week for once. And the Vikings are going into this game coming off of one of the most head-scratching, most infuriating, and just downright ugly wins that I've seen from them in a very long time. I'm sure there were worse ones in, the Christian Ponder era of the NFL and the Vikings history, but it's been a long time since I've seen a Vikings game where them winning almost didn't make it any better that I watched what I watched and witnessed what I saw out of a Vikings team. And I thought that the win we had against the Bears, the game before the whole 49ers game where things started to turn around, I thought that would go down as one of the most frustrating Vikings wins. And then we outdid it against the Raiders, a 3-0 victory. But, love it or hate it, it put us at 7-6, and it put us still in the 6th seed in the NFL. And if you look at these NFL standings here, the Vikings still have a lot they have to accomplish if they're going to be able to keep that playoff spot, because there are currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 teams below us. The Packers, who we have the tiebreaker over, the Rams, who we also have the tiebreaker over. Actually, all of these teams that are below us, we do have the tiebreaker over. So we are a full game ahead of them and also have the tiebreaker over all of these 5 teams. The Saints we beat, the Falcons we beat, the Packers we beat, the Rams and Seahawks, we all have the conference tiebreaker over them. And so that is something we have as a benefit here, not to mention the fact that the Packers are going to have to play some tough games at the end of the season. The Seahawks are about to play the Eagles, like a lot of different teams that are going to have some tough ones down the stretch here. And so the Vikings have the benefit of that. That being said, the Bengals are going to be a tough team to beat, and then we play the Lions twice and then the Packers. I still think that it's going to end up coming down to the Packers and Vikings game on New Year's Eve, of which one of these two teams will end up making the playoffs, because I think it'll only be one of the two. And I can't help but feel like the Vikings aren't going to be able to do it. That being said, if the Vikings can come into Cincinnati here and beat the Bengals, then we would have a much better case, and things are completely turned around for this team now that Nick Mullins is in. Now, is it turned around for the better? I personally think so, but how much better it's going to come, and the evidence is going to be there in the next game that we play against the Bengals, because Mullins came into the game with Josh Dobbs, and I ranted about this during my Raw reaction video after the Raiders win over the Raiders, how I didn't understand how O'Connell could have waited that long to take Dobbs out. Mullins finally came in, and he was a masterful in picking apart at least enough to get into field goal range for one drive. And he looked really good in that one drive, but to say it for a third time, it was one drive. And a lot of people saying that they thought Jaren Hall should play. Jaren Hall was the right decision for Vikings fans that had the mindset of, we're not going to make it past the first round regardless, so we might as well just throw in Hall, see how he does. And if we lose against the Bengals because we put Hall in, so be it. It's not like we were going to do much in the playoffs anyway, which is not a mindset that I want to have. If we have a chance to make the playoffs, we have to put our best QB in right now, which is Nick Mullins. He is a very reliable backup, and having a backup like Mullins just brings me back to, how in the world did we have Sean Mannion for as long as we did? Because it felt like we could have put anyone in and they would have been better than Sean Mannion, because backups are supposed to be like the solid guy that can come in and is not going to shine, but is going to do just enough to keep your team above water. And you're going to have to rely on your better players to keep that quarterback in the game like that, but he at least does enough and can lead an offense well. Sean Mannion was just horrendous. And the fact that he was our backup, not our third string, but our backup for as long as he was just incredible to me, and I will never understand it. So it's crazy having a guy like Nick Mullins that can come in and right away he can start and he can play at least decent as soon as he comes into a game, which is very refreshing. But yeah, I think that Mullins was the best option for this Vikings team as they continue to try and push towards the playoffs, and that's kind of the state of the Vikings right now heading into the game. But let's get into the actual game and the preview and my predictions for how this game will go. History between these two teams. Two long-suffering franchises, neither team with any Super Bowl wins. The Vikings 4 Super Bowls they played in, no rings, and the Bengals 3 Super Bowls and no rings, including the most recent one against the Rams in 2021, or 2022 it was, only a couple years ago. So two teams that know what it's like to be in the Super Bowl and lose, two teams that know what it's like to have some very rough and frustrating moments in their franchise histories. All time, this series is tied 7-7, so whoever wins on Saturday will win and tip those scales, I'm trying to say, and break that tie. The Vikings, interestingly enough, are 1-7 in away games against the Bengals. So in Cincinnati, they've definitely struggled. They are 6-0 in home games. Of course, we're not playing a home game, but just an interesting fact. And the last game we played against the Bengals was that 27-24 Week 1 OT loss in 2021. And I put quotations around that loss because Dalvin Cook's butt was down on the turf. And we all know this. Everyone that was watching that game knows this. And it was probably for the best because that was the season where us not making the playoffs led to us firing Mike Zimmer, which was the best decision, and I'm happy that ended up happening. So maybe it was for the best we lost that game, but that was one of the stupidest calls I've seen in Vikings games in recent memory, where he was completely down, and because it was ruled a fumble on the field, that stupid clear and indisputable evidence thing just went too far in that scenario, because it was clear to everyone that it was not out yet, but because they didn't have that whole absolutely undisputable proof. I mean, I should make a whole video talking about how I think that's stupid. Anyway, I'm getting into the weeds on a Vikings game that happened multiple years ago here. So let's just get into the actual matchup here on Saturday. So going into some of these injuries, some of these, both teams are honestly not looking great in terms of some of their starters being potentially injured, and it could completely turn around and a lot of these guys could end up playing. But right now, both teams have some good guys in the injury report. Justin Jefferson, of course, questionable. He had that internal chest injury. He went to the hospital for it just as a precaution, but he ended up being okay. Will he play? It remains to be seen. Obviously, if it was serious enough, if it is an internal chest injury and it's even remotely serious, he's not playing. So the fact that he is questionable on the injury report and not out is a pretty good sign that he might play in this game, and I feel like we might need him in order to get this job done against this Bengals team. Madison is also questionable. I feel like Chandler should be starting anyway, but that's besides the point right now in the injury report. Jalen Naylor also questionable, and not to mention Brian O'Neill. Dalton Reisner. Ed Ingram was also helped off the field in that last game, but he is not listed on the injury report to quite as much of a severity. We'll see, but that's 3 out of our 5 starting offensive linemen, which is not good for this team. On the Bengals side, Tyler Boyd is questionable as well as Jamar Chase, so it's going to be very important for the Bengals for at least one of those two guys to be starting. Obviously, Chase, the more important one out of those two, even though Boyd, I still believe, is one of the more underrated wide receiver 3s in the league right now. But very important at this point with these two guys questionable that T. Higgins came back not too long ago. And then we've got DJ Turner and Joe Bocci that are also questionable, but those guys are backup second string guys in the Cincinnati defense, so not as much of a factor there unless their starters get hurt, in which case they could be at a little bit of a loss for depth in this game. So let's go into some of the keys to the game. So a couple of these are obviously injuries because, again, these teams are both fairly injured at their top level. Will JJ play? And that will be such a big impact on this game, obviously, like always, especially with the way that this Bengals defense operates. And we missed JJ in those situations in the last game, and of course it was 3-0. So it's like we should have been able to get the job done to a better ability even without him. But this secondary for the Bengals is not fantastic. And so to have JJ in, I think he would really wreak some havoc and would make things a lot less difficult for Nick Mullins, who is starting for the first time in quite a while for the Vikings here. So JJ, obviously a big factor as always. Reisner and O'Neal. If O'Neal doesn't play, I think we are in serious trouble. And, we look at this Cincinnati defensive line. We've got Sam Hubbard on one end, and we've got Trey Hendrickson on the other. And, of course, sandwiched with B.J. Hill and DJ Reader. And we got Pratt and Wilson. I mean, this secondary, or this defensive line and shallow defensive players are very good. And Hendrickson and Hubbard without O'Neal in there would scare me, and I feel like we'd be in serious trouble. I feel like Mullins is not a particularly mobile QB, and so if Hendrickson and Hubbard can get to him the way that they've been getting to quarterbacks in the last couple weeks, then the Vikings are in trouble. So not only does the offensive line need to be healthy, they need to play well if they are healthy, because this defensive line is no joke for the Bengals. On our defensive side, another key to the game will be, will the blitz work against this offense in the way they've been doing things? Currently, Jake Browning has one of the highest completion percentages among quarterbacks in the last few weeks, and a lot of it is because they have been executing dump-offs and screens to perfection the last few weeks. Obviously, when you have a guy like Joe Mixon, that's going to be a big factor. And so if they're getting the ball out early like they have been, how much is rushing a lot of guys on 3rd and short and on those first down situations and everything in between, like we've been doing, constantly blitzing? How much of a factor will that have on this defense, on this offense? And I feel like we still have to stay true to our roots at the beginning of the game, go after them early in that way, but I feel like it'll be very apparent as the game unfolds early on in the game whether or not that is working, and if we have to shy away from it a little bit, if we have to get some of these cornerbacks a little more help. Next, we've got Kevin O'Connell. Will Kevin O'Connell allow Nick Mullins to let the ball fly, with this being his first game of the season? His first start of the season, sorry. If he doesn't do that, if he doesn't let Nick Mullins take chances down the field, let it fly, and be aggressive, I think we'll lose the game. And it's as simple as that. This Bengals offense is much better than the Raiders were last week. And yes, this Vikings defense has played very well, but Jake Browning has played very well on top of that, and a lot better than Aiden O'Connell has. So all I'm trying to say here is the Bengals are going to score points. And if we have any hope of scoring enough points than the Bengals, I think that we need to be a lot more aggressive on offense. And if O'Connell is concerned enough, obviously JJ being in is a big factor here, but Addison is also known to go for deep balls like we've seen all season. Kevin O'Connell just needs to let Mullins do that. Because if O'Connell comes into this game concerned that Mullins, it's his first start of the season, he's been a backup all season long, we should ease him into it. We should, and we should in the first couple drives give him some easy completions, let him ease into it. But past that point, especially in the second half, we need to go. We need to take chances down the field. Once again, I've said it week after week after week. If Nick Mullins throws a deep pass on 3rd and 8 and it is intercepted deep down the field, fine. It's probably going to be about the same yardage as a punt. On four, if we were to throw an interception and punt it, it's the same thing. What I don't want to see is Nick Mullins dropping back, tossing it over to Madison if he's not injured, or Chandler or whatever, for them to get stonewalled and gain maybe a yard or two and go to 4th and 6, or for Mullins to dump it off to Hawkinson for a 3 or 4 yard gain on 3rd and 8. That can't keep happening, and that's what's been happening, and it's so frustrating. Also, can we just throw the ball on 2nd and long more often, just in a general sense? We got to do that more often, or we will lose the game. We got to shut down Jamar Chase by any means necessary. I understand that T. Higgins is good. I understand that if Boyd plays, he is also going to be a major threat. And of course, again, Jamar Chase is questionable as well. He didn't practice in the last week, a couple days ago when they practiced last. But assuming that they're all healthy, or at least Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are healthy, just shut down, triple team Jamar Chase if you have to, because he's your guy who's going to be the home run guy. And again, this Vikings team is very good at the bend but don't break, and those home run plays are going to be what kills this Vikings team, because I don't think this offense with Nick Mullins in there is going to be good enough to trade back blows with this Bengals offense. Shut down Joe Mixon early and take him out of the passing game if possible, because again, we've been seeing those dump offs, we've been seeing those screen passes to the running backs, and every running back in this Bengals offense has been involved, but mostly shutting down Mixon early will get Browning a little more uncomfortable, because I'm not saying Browning has only that to stand on. He also has just been, in general, throwing the football well, but those dump offs and screens have been the way that the Bengals have manufactured success, the way they've manufactured nice long drives down the field, and we got to take care of that, take care of the short passing game and the run game in order to win this one. And then finally, once again, I've said it over and over and over again, win the turnover battle. If we win the turnover battle, we have a much better shot against the Bengals. And if we can get Browning to throw a couple interceptions, we can get him flustered. I mean, he hasn't been the starting QB for that long. And if we can start batting away balls, getting pressure on him, I mean, again, they're going to get the ball out quick, and that's going to be a little bit difficult for our typical blitzing style. But if we can cause a few of them, if we can get this Bengals team in their own head, we have a legitimate chance here. Prediction time, I'm sorry I have to say it, the Bengals, I think, will win this game. My prediction is 24-17. You know, Nick Mullins is a better option right now than Dobbs, the way that Dobbs has been playing. It was a great story, but he just has not been playing well. Mullins is a better option, but I still don't think that this offense, especially with the way I just can visualize it in my mind, the way O'Connell's going to call it, with Mullins having as little experience starting as he has in recent years, I can just see that image in my mind of O'Connell being way too conservative and the Bengals running away with it in the late 3rd quarter and throughout the 4th quarter. But I really hope that isn't the case. The Vikings still have a legitimate shot at the playoffs, and winning this game would be not necessarily a ticket sealer for the playoffs, but I definitely think it could get them to a point where, I mean, if we get up to 8-6 right now, we could lose both games against the Lions, beat the Packers on New Year's Eve, and I think still make the playoffs, because I definitely think 9-8 will make the playoffs in this kind of horse race of a field here for the playoff picture. But let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think the Vikings will find a way to win this game, or do you agree with me? Let me know in the comments if there's any key factors for this game that you think I missed, and everything else you want to say. I always love to talk to everyone in the comments. But thank you so much for watching this one. Of course, as always, Raw Reaction is coming after the game on Saturday. But thank you again. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side.